Surf City was once a surf capital for those who enjoyed the battle and sport of riding the waves. It wasn't exactly a secret, but the beaches weren't so lush as to attract too many tourists. Full of small rocks that twisted the ankles this way and that. That's how the beaches of Surf City are. Nowhere really for a blanket, but for an ingenious young soul, enough room for a snow cone stand. In this way, Surf City was a lucky surf capital, as most of the waves being ridden were by those with the knowledge and the growing skill to handle them. Very few showboaters. A hidden gem. Something newer surfers learn to respect more than the average person are the waves themselves. A key thing in both the hobby and the sport of surfing, respect of the waves that are powerful, dynamic monstrosities. There is a reason one must learn to surf, and it is rarer to be born a surf prodigy than, say, a chess prodigy, of which Surf City also has one. Water itself, when not in a placid state, has strength and surety most mortals can only dream of. Water can be used to carve a path on land, back even on itself, seemingly only answering to the moon. Now Truest Taffet, boyfriend to Ben Black, understands the water and respects it. They are good at carving a path for themselves, historically and physically. And Truest was the first statewide spelling bee champion, back before such an event was even televised. And considering their father almost named them Charlie after his own father, this came with some amusement. In surfing, Truist worships the water. They ride the waves with reverence and devotion, both because perhaps the Loch Ness Monster does vacation at Surf City shores, but also because of their father Michael. Michael, being a microbiologist with a subspecialty in water creatures, of course, meant that as a child, Truist spent many hours at the shore, digging, eating clams, enjoying stories told by beach bums, getting sunburnt and then recovering, and then, of course, learning to surf. Now, in a way, it was idyllic, but there are so many things mortals don't really know about their parents until they do. Now, Michael Taffet is a transplant to Surf City, and so is Truist. They are not, and this cannot be stressed enough, dear listeners, part of the original five families. For those reading any related files of the five families, Michael Taft's line does not come into contact with the Black family before Michael, and more importantly, before Truist. Now there are some in Surf City who come down to the water's edge just to watch Truist cut through the waves, leaving a trail of pure white slashes behind as though decorating the waves themselves. Truist moves more as a shark than a human in those moments, and there are appropriate oohs and ahs, as if back in the old days of the Surf City beach competitions, intermediate class. No matter how often Truist tries to surf only at the barest edges of the morning, they are always there, always watching. A perpetual crowd with unbroken ankles and invisible necks, heads firmly planted, eyes forward, unison, as though waiting for something only Truist can provide. If you, or your charge, were to look at them, you would find that you cannot look at them closely, nor can you remember them for very long. You may pass them later in the grocery store. You may pass them while speaking to your charges, even that same day. They may be the mechanic of your car. They wear the same tweed pattern on their jackets in the same dark khaki color. One of the men in the group shaves, but always nicks himself once on the cheek. There is always an audience when Truist is on the waves. When Truist does their best not to notice, they find it easier to breathe even while surfing, as though the mist of the water itself not just cools and reinvigorates, but also fills their lung and diaphragm. For hours after finishing surfing, they are in a sterling moment, as Ben likes to say. And Ben does like these moments. The devotee of the surfer, of the supernatural, has the most vitality of anyone Ben has ever known, and when they make love, on the off chance they can catch each other in such a sterling moment, it is the most rambunctious, it is the most given to itself, and for Ben, sometimes even the most beautiful. It is as the old saying goes, listeners, when your lungs are full, your heart may also be open. And of course, in Surf City, there is not just one type of mist, not just the mist of a wave. There is a certain type of mist that is mixed with smoke and incense that hides its dubious nature, a mix of pheromones linked to desire and animal hunger. It is the smoke that Lewis is walking Edgar through, talking him into some sort of scheme, pyramid or otherwise, under the guise of having had Surf City donuts, drop off donuts at his quote unquote party. We don't have that much in savings, Lewis, Edgar says, so if this is a very smoky scheme, it's not going to work. Well, now, my friend, why does everything have to be a scheme? That's not who I am, Lewis replies. I was there for the lemonade stand incident, Lewis. It's who you are. Mr. Swan. Please call me Mr. Swan. If it weren't for the smoke, Edgar perhaps would have rolled his eyes. Okay, Mr. Swan. You seem so distant from our friendship, Mr. Black. Whatever happened to us? Hmm? You want to get into this in the middle of a party? Really, Lou? I simply want to know. I've always been fond of you, Edgar. Edgar hears a noise in the background, the sound almost of an avalanche, but muffled and far away. A part of his brain tells him that something has happened to worry about, but since there is no current physical harm to his person, he holds his body without tension or fear, but not by much, considering how deep the craving for VR still goes, for how long Rage has been missing. Even now, Edgar thinks of him, and there's a pit in his stomach that he can't quite describe. He ignores it so he can talk to Lewis. We just never had that much in common, Lewis. Is it because I wasn't in your boxing club? Edgar grunts, but the grunt comes out as a cough. You never liked boxing. You made up stories. You started an art club and tried to take over the gymnasium during one of our meetups. You screwed me on purpose. An old flame starts to rise in Edgar's gut, and then his throat clinging to him, warming him like a turtleneck in summer. His hand shakes a little, twitching nearly into a fist. In the haze, the mask Lewis wears is invisible, and Lewis's smile is strange and sloppy. Edgar would swear was more bird than man, were that such a thing. Ancient history, Lewis concedes. Don't you think? We were both much younger men then. Speak for yourself. I'm still young, and quit trying to butter me up. Just tell me what you want. At that moment, Lewis moves just a little to their left, and a table appears, as if out of a fog. On the table are an assortment of illicit substances, including several vials, one of which certainly looks like VR. What do I want, Mr. Black? What does anyone want? Eddie. Today's reminder from the Cosmic is about penguins. They are adorable, and they are birds, but they do not fly. Penguins. Sometimes your charge may talk about another mortal in a tux as though they are a penguin. Some may reference the penguin waddle. What do you need to know about the penguin? They enjoy fish and swimming. In a way, they are a lot like human mortals. The Cosmic recommends for any zoological expeditions or with the charge who is fond of zoological things in nature a trip to a local, well-renowned, and mortal-grade ethical zoological garden or arboretum. This could only be good for them and for you. Stop. Take a breath. Enjoy the natural pursuits that your mortal charge may yearn for. Zoology. She was out hunting after all that, Rage's blood just fresh on the tips of her arrows. Not to frame anyone for a crime, nothing so pedestrian as that. Besides, the Honorable Sheriff Omer would have seen right through. No, the ritual she used Rage for did require use of some blood, but Julie can't just afford two sets of arrows, and truth be told, the red tint is nice. She enjoys it. What is Julie looking for out in the mists of the alleyways? Well, dear listener, she is looking for vampires. They are a thing to worry about, but they, in this day and age, do not scowl, nor hover, nor skulk. They don't really feel the need to. Due to good and whimsical press, they simply use a new dating application for them that is found on their communication devices, such as cellular telephones. Capital B, lowercase I, lowercase t, capital R, or in normal parlance, fighter. Now, Julie would not necessarily care under normal circumstances what a vampire and a consenting adult or two vampires could get up to in the normal course of events. Indeed, there is a certain male and female vampire couple who, in one universe, catches her eye as she works at a flower shop, making funeral and birthday arrangements. That is a lovely universe, listeners, and perhaps one day you will hear about that version of Surf City. But in this version of Surf City, Julie is a wounded and trapped creature. She fights against threads and creatures, believing low technology and wise aim will keep her safe, give her shelter, give her a path out to somewhere, anywhere that is not Surf City. She continues to slog forward or downward, depending upon who you ask. Julie sees one out of the corner of her eye that is heading into the Dragon's Wing pub and eatery. The Dragon's Wing is one of those fancy new places that recently came about in Surf City, and it has incandescent light bulbs. It's sometimes busy, but really most especially on the weekends. It's the kind of weekend that charges separate for a plate of French fried potatoes hot from the oil. With the grease, it is less popular and harder to find to justify the charge as well. Julie slips an arrow into a secret compartment across her arm and intends to go into the pub after the vampire when her path becomes blocked and she cannot exit the alleyway. Archer, they say in a flat voice. The Archer. A note from Trouble. Hot beverages are a bit of a nightmare, aren't they? Even when they don't spill, there's so many of them. You know what we like? Coffee. The caffeine, the beans harvested by labor, the darkness and the richness of it, the addiction. Sure, your charge may say they don't like coffee, but can you be so sure? What is in that cup that they're drinking right now? Do you remember your sense of smell? It is coffee, that robust, addictive, dark substance we absolutely adore. Have a cup today. Now, listeners, if you remember, if you've ever studied the vampire or vampire arts, that the vampire has a 10-step process to acquisition of prey, but it's nearly the same ritual as a mortal has with a lover. There's a meeting of a hand, meeting of an eye. There's a focus on a body part that allures, hidden or provocatively open. There's a shoulder check over. Am I the one they're looking at? There's a matter of buttons. Buttons are a universal thing for both mortal and all supernatural beings in such a world. And that's where we return back to Ben and Truest now together. That there is little the matter, save for the buttons. Buttons are simply right now in Ben's way. Ben's hands fumble and shake with desire, and he tries to speak, but Truest, top him, will not let him. He gazes up, enamored at his lover. Truest still smells of the sea, especially in its hair. And they do make love. It is sex, and it is righteous, and it is regal, and it does begin in the kitchen. on the sturdy kitchen island, propped up so one feels just as tall as the other. Ben's childhood bed is no longer on a frame just for the sake of convenience and sound, to give you an idea of their rambunctiousness level. Ben will admit that it is much easier to hide his relationship with Truest from Edgar, and Mace is just more around. Edgar has been acting strange, and so now Ben, in those stolen moments, feels frenzy. He makes him think of 80s movies, of ladders and lattices of climbing to see a lover, the risk. It reminds him of being 15 in a way, only now he's much more rebellious in this, if you could consider him such a thing. It is not with all this passion and easy and effortless touch of the hand as it once was. And with his hours of work in the bakery, his back and his knees had terrible tolls taken on them. There is stress, there is unknown, and when Truest is not there for Ben, there is the missing of a lover. But it is not out of shame that they see each other less than either desires. Truest knows and understands, and Truest is a little afraid. Ben does take a long time to fall asleep. He wants to stay awake longer than Truest wants him to. Ben desperately wants to be with Truest. There's no time for Truest to slip something in his glass of wine, like perhaps he would have otherwise, and there's less time and effort to waste. Truest has a syringe and a needle. He withdraws a bit of blood that Ben won't miss. More than a mosquito would take, but not enough necessarily for Ben to notice or to be dismissed. Truest learned from his father Michael how to be an expert with needle insertion points, and Ben will be able to tell himself anything. Ben wakes up alone when he does, not knowing what Truest has done. But what does Truest want with Ben's blood? Did Edgar take Lewis's offer? Did Lewis ever explain what the offer was? Who is this fateful group that kept Julie from her appointed vampire round? Are they the same group that haunts Truest? If you want to know those answers and more, you'll just have to tune in to the next broadcast. Perhaps you'll find the answer then. Until next time, dear listeners, the path of the cosmic is open to trod. Surf City is an audio work of John McDonald and John McDonald Productions. It is meant for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to advise anyone on lifestyle, health, or spiritual philosophical issues of there or any time. All opinions expressed are held by the characters and in some cases the creator of Surf City and Surf City Donuts, John McDonald.